25% reaction pouring in after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump announced he's going to slap that tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico as of January 20th, his first day in office. For more, we are joined by Moshe Lander. He's a senior lecturer of economics at Concordia University. Moshe, Trump claiming that the tariffs are paid by the country they're imposed on. Tariffs are actually paid by companies that import and export goods, which then pass those added costs on to consumers. Back in 2022, Canada exported $438 billion worth of goods south of the border. Those main products, if you're curious, include crude, petroleum, cars and trucks, and petroleum gas. So what then does 25% tariff mean for Canadians and consumers and Americans?
There's a difference between a large country and a small country. Canada, despite its vast geography, is a small country. So if we were to impose tariffs on the Americans, that's different than the Americans imposing tariffs on us. If you remember the rhetoric back in 2016, Trump kept talking about, I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to get Mexico to pay for it. It's kind of the same thing here, that if he puts tariffs on Canada, it's really going to be Canada ultimately that pays for it. It's not the American consumer that's going to feel the effects of the tariff, because they're a big economy imposing tariffs on a small economy. And so that power imbalance means that it really is going to fall on us. It's going to filter back then to our producers, and they're going to have to find a way then to pay for that. All that means then is that the amount of money that they actually receive for their products is going to fall by essentially about 25%.
Which is huge. The United States' largest import from Canada is oil. In July, Canadian oil exports to the U.S. hit a record 4.3 million barrels a day. So then, Moshe, which sectors of our economy could be hardest hit by this planned tariff?
Well, it's exactly like you said a minute ago, right? The big sectors are the auto industry, a lot of the natural resource industry. The backbone of our economy is really that we produce for our own consumers, but because American consumers have very similar tastes, much of what we produce goes to them as well. And so it's going to be broad-based. It's going to affect every province. And a lot of those big industries that are the main employers are going to feel it across the board. So a lot of the natural resources, whether it's forestry products, oil and gas, water, the automotive industry, a lot of heavy industry, a lot of what we produce, once you reach that scale, you're going to try and sell it to the Americans too.
You know, Ottawa has been preparing for this, maybe not 25%, but Trump had certainly been signaling 20% throughout his campaign, even before being reelected. And during his first administration, Canada responded to Trump's tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum with retaliatory tariffs on American steel and aluminum. So what kind of reaction could we expect from Ottawa?
Yeah, they're going to have to impose retaliatory tariffs. There's no way to avoid it. I don't think that talking and trying to reason with the Trump administration, especially this Trump administration, which seems a little crazier, let's say, than the first administration, is going to work. What Canada did effectively the last time was that they targeted their tariffs. And so what they did was they tried to find the key jurisdictions, Mitch McConnell, Orrin Hatch at the time, representing Kentucky and Utah, and they went after products that were particular to their regions and put tariffs on them. The idea was to get the attention of Republican leadership and hopefully then get the ear of the president and say, please knock this off, sir. It's the same sort of strategy that's going to have to work here. It's just that there's a different leadership that's emerging this time around, but they're going to have to react in that same sort of strategic way.
We know that CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement, not up for renewal until 2026. However, this sounds like this is happening sooner. Trump has already said he wants to renegotiate the deal. He said that before about ripping up NAFTA. It happened. We ended up with CUSMA. So what does Trump making an announcement this far in advance of 2026 mean for our relationship with the U.S. in terms of trade?
Well, you know, Trump has been in the news as a building tycoon for 40 years. And what's interesting is that there's one policy for 40 years while he was a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, a non-presidential candidate, president. The one thing that he's always been clear on is he does not like free trade, which is unfortunate because one of the backbones of economic thinking is that free trade is generally a good thing. So it's not surprising that he doesn't like CUSMA, he didn't like NAFTA. The fact that he's willing to rip it up or throw Mexico out or impose tariffs every which way just is actually the one policy that he's been clear on from the very, very beginning before he was ever a politician. So at this point, then, Canada has, for example, suggested jettisoning Mexico as a way to maybe satisfy Trump's distaste for free trade agreements. So it's almost to protect ourselves, we're going to throw away our partner. At this point, it could be anything goes. And, you know, there are tribunals within the CUSMA arrangements to deal with these sorts of things. But if he doesn't recognize their jurisdiction, it really does weaken the paper that agreement is written on.
One last question, Moshe. Before, when he had imposed tariffs, that had to do with trade. Now he has linked it squarely to immigration and border security. What do you make of that reasoning?
I think it's just part of the changed rhetoric. Not that he was actually sensible or reasonable 8 years ago, but now he just seems to have completely focused on a particular hot button topics that really gets his base jazzed up. And this is the topic. And so when he's saying that drugs are flowing across the Canadian border, well, it may or may not be true. You don't rip up free trade agreements. There are other ways to deal with border security that doesn't involve wrecking the economy of one of your biggest trade partners. So I think that a lot of this at this point is bluster. I'm not going to say that he wouldn't do it. I just want to wait and see, is he really going to do this on day one, or is this just something that is maybe a negotiating tactic? And that's what the Canadian government wants to find out. What is it that you really want, and what can we do to satisfy that in exchange for dropping the 25% tariffs?
Moshe Lander, thanks so much for joining us this. If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.